Welcome back, everyone. Blessed day. We are in a new month. It is March 2nd, and so we have some new poetry to go over. Unfortunately, we are in a war in the Middle East, well, at least the US military. And well, that's something that we want to look at as we continue to improve and evolve um, as a species on this planet. So we'll be talking about that a little bit. And it's Mental Health Monday. And so we'll take a look at the poetry, mostly the poetry today, and see what we have in terms of mental health and how we can draw from the wisdom of the ancient documents. And moving forward, we'll be looking at spring and the environment and the conditions that spring presents. So let's see, actually, I wanted to show you first the Monday, March 2nd image for Mental Health Monday as we mind the spiritual residents. Previously, we talked about how the mind is not relegated to just inside the head, and the self isn't relegated just inside the skin. And remember, we defined or we used Dr. Dan Siegel's definition of the mind as an emergent and embodied process that monitors and regulates the flow of energy and information. So, this presents an amazing opportunity to self assess, self discover, and self explore. And remember that coincides with Nature Gong Fu, the Gong Fu of internal vision as a skill for observing, looking, and contemplating upon oneself. And remember that in Chinese Qigong, we look at five regulations: the body, the breath, the mind, the qi, and the spirit. And we attempt to harmonize those and regulate those to the point where we are regulating without regulating, doing of no doing, wu wei. Last week we talked about the mind of no mind and connected to the breath of no breath. Take a look at last week's Mental Health Monday to dive into that. And so today, let's look at the a new poetry. I don't know if about you, but I was kind of getting a little, um, maybe, well, not as stimulated with the continued poetry. So let's see how it goes with this March one. If one is able to keep the true singularity, the Zen Yi, the Wuji state, then the breathing will not be to and fro. It's like the fetus in the mother's womb. This is called the great steadiness. Now, what do we mean? What does this mean? And how can we draw upon this wisdom? This comes from the secret recording of nourishing life, and this is translated by my teacher, and we'll read on his translation in this book, the Qigong meditation, embryonic breathing. And I believe this is the new cover of embryonic breathing. I have this version, so we'll be reading from this version. So let's do that. So literally, the Zen Yi means real one, the real singularity. And we've been talking about this concept of singularity, and I've been showing you images on what exactly singularity is. So if you can remember the 10,000 things, let's go over here. What does singularity image look like? What does it what does non-singularity look like, right? I hope you can remember. Here it is. The real singularity, the singleness, the one, implies the main energy polarity of human constructed by the spiritual center and the chi center. As mentioned earlier, these two centers constitute two energy poles of our body and are connected via the spinal cord, the thrusting vessel. One handles the spiritual life, the upper dantian, and then one handles the energy, the physical life, and the sustenance that we need for physical life, which is the lower dantian. So let's just take a look at how that's depicted. And I believe we actually have it here. And you guys are going to start getting used to these images because I'm going to continue to use them. But I hope that they can present more understanding and idea, I just use them to help give me understanding and idea. So going back, the two main energy centers in the head and in the gut system, the lower dantian, upper dantian, are connected by what's called the chongmai, the thrusting vessel, the main energy vessel that connects the lower energy center and upper energy center. Remember we talked about two as one? We even paralleled that with relational theory as depicted by Dr. Dan Siegel. If we're not, if the self isn't just regulated to just the skin, then how do we define self in our world in terms of the human species, in terms of humankind? How do we define self? So we asked about, where is mind, but also where is the spirit? So Dr. Yang talks about the spiritual residence. Where is the spirit housed in the body? Where is the mind housed in in the body? The lower dantian belongs to the yang, which supplies the quantity of qi and thus nourishes the physical life, while the upper dantian belongs to the yin, which controls the quality of the qi's manifestation. So this is really important. In Qigong, we always talk about quality and quantity, and we can see how the balance or the striving for balance for quality and quantity definitely coincides with mental health, understanding the microbiome, the gut system, having health in the gut, and how that is the foundation and even the storehouse for the feel good chemicals that eventually end up in the brain. So, what is the Zen Yi? It means the body's yin spirit and the yang spirit unified as one, two as one. In function, they're one, but they're still two. If a human is able to place his original truth, pure mind, no agenda, authentic self, at the heaven valley, the spiritual valley, then it is the Tao of keeping the Zen Yi, the origin, the spirit. Also, Wu Ji. The head is considered the heaven, while the perineum is considered the sea bottom. The perineum is the lowest part of the torso between your genitalia and the anus. Therefore, the heaven valley means the valley in the head, namely the spiritual valley, the sun gu. When the sun gu is able to stay at its residence, then the chi can then be kept at its center as well. And remember this. Let's remind ourselves of the January quote or the January poetry, the where don't where the once there is initiation of a thought, then there's fire all around. So this coincides with coming out of the center, out of the singularity, out of the origin. Once you come out of the origin, then you have a chance of creating fire. And this is all just within the thought realm, the energy realm. So I was able to utilize AI and construct an image of the spiritual center, where the spiritual center might be, as described um, by Dr. Young and and the ancient texts here. So to keep the mind at these two poles means to maintain that singularity, that wu ji. When the mind stays at these two polarities, the mind will not be attracted by the outside world, and the chi can also stay at its residence without leaving and being consumed. It's said that what is embryonic breathing? It is the Tao of abiding at the real one. It is the way your strategy, your skill and technique of keeping oneness, singularity at your spiritual residence. Meaning the Shen and the breathing are mutually relying on each other. Remember in in five regulations, we say that the regulating that the breath is strategy. So when we do our Tai Chi or Qigong movement as a body regulation, we coordinate it with the breath as a strategy to upregulate or downregulate. Often it's downregulating for relaxation. When the Shen condenses and it concentrates, then the Qi will be stabilized. And so, what does that mean for mental health and personal well being if your energy, if your chi is stabilized? And what are they trying to tell us here? That when the Shen condenses, that the chi will be stabilized. So it's written, if one's able to abide at the Zi, the original center, then the breathing will not be to and fro. That's the meaning of this poetry. So you can use the breath to regulate the mind. You can use the mind to regulate the breath. Here it's saying, if you can concentrate your spirit in its center, then the breathing won't be to and fro, and therefore the energy won't be dispersed or it won't be distracted, it won't be leaked out. If one's able to abide, then the real chi will condense by itself at the centers. So we're looking here at this image. We'll continue to, of course, look more, explore more. We'll continue to explore more into that poetry as we move as we move through the month. But here in this image, what we're looking at is the upper dantian as the house of the spirit. So the whole head is the upper dantian, right? We talked about last week the internal coiling to find deeper, to go deeper to the center. Here we have a large mass, the head and the skull and the brain as the upper dantian, the house of the spirit. And we're looking at the bed chamber. It's also called the mud pill palace, the Niwan Gong in Dr. Young's text. So here's the conceptual model, the house of the spirit, which is the head, the bed chamber, which is often, I think what we refer to it is the limbic system, and then the thalamus and the pineal gland and the pituitary glands are the spiritual residence, or what we're theorizing as the spiritual residence, where it's interestingly the center one, and also it's situated to, and this is kind of the role of the thalamus, to process information from the various parts of the brain, including the brain stem, which is the, you know, the oldest brain, the oldest, in contrast to the prefrontal cortex, which is the newest part of the brain here, which is responsible for executive functioning. You know, and they say that the limbic center areas, the hypothalamus, I believe, is concentrated more or focused more, or this is where emotions typically reside. And so, what we're talking about is keeping the mind, keeping the attention, and keeping the focus at this center. If we keep the, where the mind goes, the energy follows. That's a rule of Qigong, right? Whenever you want to lift your hand to turn the knob to open the door, that has to be a thought first, whether it's a conscious or a subconscious thought. To lift the pen to write on the paper, that's a conscious or a subconscious thought. So our energy is going out. What we're talking about here is bringing the energy in, bringing the attention and focus in, and holding it there so as not to let energy sink, leak. And then also as a basis for stabilizing the chi and stabilizing the mind. And then what does, if we're looking at mental health, what are the implications upon behavioral health and action and habituation for, and then also what does stable action, stable speech, what does regulated and healthy speech and action look like? So the mud pill Niwan Gong, uh, talking about the pineal gland. And so I'm a little confused. So the pituitary here, pineal gland, I believe is in the right here in this backside. So I'm not sure. Let's see. What we're talking about here is the thalamus and this zone, this area. I think this is also called the third ventricle. I was doing a little research. So, you know, I'm just kind of delving into this into the anatomy of this, which is something that I've never really focused on. But when we've done the meditation, we are finding through interoception, through our sensing and through our feeling, a center of the mind, a center of the brain rather, understanding that between the eyebrows and then drawing a line from the forehead to the back of the head, and then the temples just above the ears and around the temples, and a cross section there. That's our area of focus, thinking about condensing the Shen, right? So in terms of mental health, what we're looking at is condensing and focusing. When we're, and the strategy or the function of contemplation and meditation. When we close the eyes, we turn off the eyes to the external. So now we can omit that as a distraction, right? It's hard to close the hearing because as a distraction, but we want to still mitigate that. But then now we have the internal thoughts, the internal sensations and feelings, and then whatever the body wants to bring up as a sensation and a feeling. But what we're practicing is the condensing of the focus. As the focus condenses, the energy condenses. As the energy condenses, then we can say that the spirit can condense, right? Because if you think about it, once our mind open or once our eyes open and our ears are attuned to the external, where the mind goes and the attention goes, the energy follows. Thus, the spirit follows as well. But we want to have agency and a sense of control, right? Mental health and well-being over our mind, our energy, and our spirit. Embryonic breathing is a strategy that takes us back to the concept and the sense and the idea of pre-birth when we were just in the womb and try to elicit the feeling of that as an exploration and as a meditation. It's like the fetus in the mother's womb. Once the fetus comes out and is exposed to the external, it's crying, it's breathing, it's eating, right? But once it's in, but as it's in the womb, it's getting everything from the womb. It's housed, the baby is housed, condensed, and regulated and restricted all within the womb. And that's how we want our spirits, our energy, and our focus housed, contained in our spiritual center as a practice for mental well being. Remember, because the morality of mind is going to influence the internal, going to influence the morality of speech and action. So I hope that speaks to you. Really interesting stuff. Um, Tomorrow, Tai Chi Tuesday, we'll be looking more at this, and and this week. So embryonic breathing is a really deep subject. I can't say that I'm an expert on it. I have had experience with embryonic breathing meditation, and it's something to look at and explore because for my teacher, it's the foundational practice for all of Qigong and for even Tai Chi, foundational practice. We'll talk more about that. Until next time, may your Qi flow smoothly and remember to embrace the woo. Take care. Have a good one. Love yourself and love each other as self.